I can act my way into feeling better sooner than I can feel my way into acting better. So what are the actions that I can take, right here, right now, that, live my values and express who I want to be?
Hello, I'm Dr Jodie Richardson, and you're listening to, well, Hello Anxiety, a podcast where we end the struggle with anxiety and build our toolkit of practical skills to thrive. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the podcast. It is a joy to introduce today's guest to you. Dr Chris McCurry and I have been acquainted for quite some time now, and I'm a huge fan of his work. He is an author, a child and adolescent psychologist, and an expert when it comes to anxiety and using acceptance and commitment therapy and applying that to life in general and life's challenges, as well as, of course, anxiety and parenting anxious kids. So welcome, Chris.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
And you're coming to us from Seattle, Washington.
Yes, it's true. Where it is now deep autumn and cool and rainy.
Oh, goodness. And what are things like for you in this very, very challenging and different COVID world? What's like for you life in Seattle?
Well, we've done a very good job here with the whole COVID thing. We sadly had our first U.S. deaths not too far from here in a nursing home, and so the authorities here, the state government, the governor, other officials got on it right away, and we've been very, very good about the whole masking and social distancing thing. Seattle is very well vaccinated, so we feel fairly comfortable here. But it has been a challenge, particularly doing therapy remotely, and a lot of the therapists in town have been struggling to do the Zoom therapy sessions and such, and doing that with kids has been interesting. It's been interesting to actually do therapy with a child while they're in their bedroom, and you get to see their world a little bit, but it also means they're not quite as contained in your office, and so they might get up and run out of the room because they heard their sister doing something and they want to investigate it. So it's been a challenge, but we're getting through.
Oh, good. I'm pleased to hear that. I'm pleased to hear that you feel, relatively safe. That's important. That's, and when it comes to anxiety, that's such a huge trigger. And could you talk to us a bit about, feeling unsafe is obviously a trigger of anxiety. Can you talk to us about, there's such a prevalence. It's a very challenging time, and how and why we're seeing so much anxiety. I know people listening will be experiencing anxiety maybe for the first time, or their own anxiety or their child's being amplified. Tell us why.
Well, there is the feeling unsafe aspect of it, but anxiety is also about managing uncertainty. And even if there's no obvious danger or threat, just not knowing what's coming next and having our mind be fertile ground for imagining the worst possible scenarios, I think has generated a lot of anxiety. Here in the States, we've been trying to get kids back into school, and that's been an uneven and chaotic process. And so, parents don't know, within days of school starting, whether or not their kids are going back into in-person school or remotely or some sort of hybrid. So I think that just not knowing what's going to happen is a real fertile ground for a lot of anxiety and a lot of worry. And again, the human mind is great at coming up with all the possible things that could go wrong. And then we seize on those things, and there we go.
It's true. And there's just the uncertainty has just been so prolonged, and it is a challenge. And going back to school is something that will be happening here soon in Victoria, in particular. In other states in Australia, kids have still been in school with their teachers. We've been, well, here in Victoria, we've been in lockdown for a very long time, on and off. This is our 6th. And, what would you say to parents who have kids who are anxious about returning to school? How would you sort of help talk a family through that sort of a challenge? It's going to be a very real challenge for a lot of families in the coming weeks.
Certainly. Well, there's the old expression, secure your own oxygen mask first before offering assistance to others. So I think it's good for parents to acknowledge their own anxieties about that, and to take some good breaths and try to hold that lightly, because that's just part of the experience. Of course, parents are going to be anxious, kids are going to be anxious, kids are going to have a lot of questions, what if my friends don't want to play with me anymore, or whatever it may be. And I think parents should honor that, to recognize that that's a natural thing that their kids are going to be going through in these uncertain times, and to validate that, to be able to reflect back to their kids, to say, I like statements. Sounds like you're feeling, kind of worried about that right now. And putting the right now on it, kind of puts a little timestamp on it, where it's like, well, maybe, you won't be worried about that in a few minutes, but I get it. Right now you are. And to just not invalidate what the kids are going through, but to say, yeah, I can see why you would be worried about that. And, maybe coming up with a plan. So let's come up with a plan for, first day of, back in school, overcoming your shyness, or whatever it may be, to say hello to your friends, or to connect in some way, or to be proactive, like, to be able to say to your friends, so what are we going to do today, at recess, so that you're not just standing out there in the playground with no plan and, feeling bereft. So, helping kids come up with some strategies for how to deal with these difficult situations, but mostly just to honor their feelings, and to articulate them and put some words around them. There's a difference between being scared and being worried. And I think by calling it, what it is, which is, you're having some worries right now, as opposed to like you're scared, I think can help modulate what the kids are feeling a little bit. So validation, and come up with some strategies for, coping and problem solving.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing some practical strategies for our listeners today, because it is hard to know how to react, or we can sometimes react. We want to be able to respond, don't we, when anxiety begins to show? And those strategies are really helpful. I know that in your book you shared Gray Bar's, I'm not sure if it was his first or second law, about all behavior being a message.
That's Gray Bar's first law.
First
All
law,
behavior is a
yes.
message.
I've got to meet this Gray Bar guy at some stage.
He's
So
hilarious.
your book, Parenting Anxious Children with Mindfulness and Acceptance, is an amazing book, and one I highly recommend
Thank
for
you. You're very
parents.
kind.
And it's really so insightful, beautifully written, with your sort of trademark warmth and wisdom. And so tell us about Gray Bar's first law. Tell us about how it came to be and what it means.
Well, Steve Graybar was a fellow graduate student at the University of Nevada, Reno, many, many years ago. And he's one of the smartest, funniest guys I've ever met. He's actually a psychodynamic guy. But he said all behavior is a message, and a behavior won't begin to change until the person knows the message has been received. And so very often when kids are, acting out, they're trying to communicate something. And it's the parent's job to say, I got the message. And that's not going to turn a kid's behavior off like flipping a switch. But if you don't in some meaningful way say, I get it. You're feeling anxious now. You're feeling angry now. You're feeling disappointed. The child will continue to, demonstrate that, acting out behavior, or even amplify it. And so the validation piece, where, the statement, you're feeling X. You're thinking why. again, it's not going to make them suddenly go, oh, how astute of your mother, I'm calm now. But to be able to just say, I get it. And in a meaningful way means not being, too calm about it. If you say, I understand you're upset, it's totally invalidating. But if you say, wow, you're really angry right now, parents are afraid of the feelings. Like, oh, if I show any emotion, that'll just, fan the flames. But if you say, I get it, you're feeling this way right now, or, oh yeah, that is so disappointing. Um, it communicates on a nonverbal level, which is incredibly important. And again, it can kind of help the child feel heard, and then, maybe at that point you can redirect them a little bit. Koa Whittingham, one of your colleagues there, has a wonderful thing where she calls it connect and shape, where you connect with the child, through validation or whatever it may be, and then start moving them in a different direction. So what we can think of as parental aikido, where you just sort of take that energy and just sort of move it, like, oh, look at chicken, just maybe some brute distraction or whatever. But that first piece is that whole body validation. Like, yeah, I get it. Grebar's second law is he who cares least has the most power. And I
Ain't that
reframe
true
that.
in life?
I reframe that as the more you care, the more you must be willing to bear. So, as parents, we have to care about things that our kids don't care about, like, their teeth and stuff like that. But at a certain point, a parent has to go, whoa, I'm caring more about your, science fair project than you are, and you have to maybe pull back a little bit. But the validation piece is really critical as a first move. And that's part of an acronym that I use, that's S.O.B.E.R, which is stop, just stop, observe what's going on, including what's going on with yourself, take a deep breath, expand, pull back and go, okay, what's going on here? What do I need to do? And then respond. And then very often the best first response is some sort of validation move, which, may just serve to buy you a little time to think about, what am I going to do next? But to start with that is often a good place to, respond.
It's being sober. I could take that in so many different directions. I won't, but it's a beautiful acronym, and it's one of the challenges, I think, for us as parents and even people listening who aren't parents at the moment, who are interacting with colleagues or family members or partners. It's that at the moment tensions are high, and I know even myself that I've, if we sort of talk about getting to a tipping point, I've gotten to that tipping point and tipped over the edge, more than once. And so what would you say to people who, first and foremost, in terms of putting on their own oxygen mask and managing their own stuff, because we can really only respond and apply, the SOBER acronym's beautiful: stop, observe what's happening, take a breath, expand your awareness, zoom out, and then respond. We can do that so much more easily when we're managing our own emotions and stresses, can't we?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if we can in the moment. Well, I think we're all feeling a little raw. We're all feeling kind of burned out. It's been an incredibly stressful, if not traumatic, 18, almost 20 months now. So we're talking about resilience. How do we maintain our resilience in the face of all this stress? And one of my favorite definitions of resilience is struggling well. And just, I'm struggling, but I'm struggling well. And, it may not be pretty, but I'm getting through. And all the basics, the things that we know contribute to resilience. So it's, sleep, it's, diet, it's exercise for sure. It's, a time away, because, parenting is an incredibly depleting endeavor. And it's not a two-way street. We really can't expect our kids to fill us up. I mean, there are moments of joy, and they're so cute when they're asleep, but mostly it's pretty draining. And so you need sources outside of the family that are regular and that are yours to, whether it's going to the gym or painting class or whatever it may be, just to get restored a little bit, because it is depleting, and the times we live in are just exacerbating all that. So the basics for maintaining our healthy body and mind are really important right now.
Mm. The idea of resilience is one that we all want resilience. We all want to be more resilient, and it does. I think it'd be really interesting to explore how does the brain change as we become more resilient? How do we, at that sort of brain level, even if we're sort of just talking about, connections between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, how does that change as resilience builds? What happens over the long term that enables us to sort of cope better?
Well, I couldn't tell you at the level of anatomy, because that's not my area, but it's my wife is actually a geriatric psychologist. Her area of expertise is Alzheimer's and sleep in the elderly, and she does a lot of things. She's really amazing. And one of the things that they found in terms of healthy aging is just exercising your brain. So whether it's crossword puzzles or whatever it may be, is that you build up neural connections, and even older folks can grow the brain. And so by keeping the brain active and doing interesting things, you have more reserve. And I think when you get stressed, it's in part just habit, mental habits. If I'm spending a lot of time ruminating on my worries and all the bad things that can happen, it's like wearing a channel. Somebody once said that anxiety is a thin stream that eventually carves a canyon into which everything else drains.
Mm.
And so it's sort of like these are mental habits, and I'm not big on I'm going to think 10 positive thoughts for every negative thought. I don't think that works necessarily, but just, it's sort of like, what am I feeding my head? What am I feeding my brain every day? And if we're doom scrolling and like looking at the news, it's like, ugh. And it's just so easier for the brain to kind of fall into that rut and stay there. So by you putting in the effort to, think about things that are uplifting and positive, and doing things that are healthy and life affirming, following our values, I think we can stay in those tracks better. And then if we do bounce into the the worry rut or the the discouragement rut or whatever, I think it's easier to get out and get back into something neutral or even positive.
Mm. Thank you for that beautiful metaphor. I've not heard that quote before, but it's
Isn't that
very
nice?
telling, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes. It's great that you've come to talk about rumination and worry, which is such a hallmark of anxiety. How do you start to address? I know you wrote about the anxiety goggles, which I love. I'd love for you to talk about that, and how can you, or how do you help children or parents or people who come to see you with worry and rumination? What are some of the insights you share and the skills that you help them build?
Well, there are so many metaphors within ACT that um, speak to this and speak to what we call diffusion. Fusion being I'm stuck in my thoughts, I'm up in my head, and there's chessboards and buses and all kinds of things. I like the goggles because there's a difference between looking through a thought or feeling like I can't do this, and looking at the thought or feeling like I'm having the thought I can't do this. And so it really starts with just recognition what we might think of as metacognition of, being able to step back and go, oh yeah, I'm thinking that stuff, aren't I? And then pivoting towards something else. And that can be hard when you're kind of like in that rut. You're going down that path of like rumination. But if you can go, oh, I'm ruminating right now. Okay, what do I do? And so I will often tell kids, find your hands, because they're somewhere nearby. Oh, there they are. Now, what is it you're supposed to be doing with your hands right now? Oh yeah, I'm supposed to be like pouring the cereal into the bowl and now the milk and eating breakfast, instead of focusing on what's going to happen at school today. But it's ties in with mindfulness, where okay, I'm eating my breakfast, and then that stuff of like what's going to happen at school is still there, but it's more kind of in the background. So it's really a lot of what am I attending to? The William James, the father of American psychology, back in like 1890 or something, said, my experience is what I agree to attend to. And we don't agree to attend to anxiety, we feel more compelled to it. But if I'm attending to my anxiety, that's going to be my experience. So I've got to be able to recognize, oh yeah, I'm doing that, and then have a strategy, whether it's find your hands or take a deep breath or some sort of what we call a pivotal response, where I need to like pivot and go in this direction. And sometimes you need something in the middle, like finding your hands or taking a deep breath or whatever it may be, in order to pivot and go in a different direction, for however long, until you get pulled back up into the thinking again. But pivoting for 10 or seconds or so can be enough time to make a better decision than you were going to do if you were continuing in this direction.
That's a really practical way that any of us can get out of our head, back into our body, and then take action in a new direction, and something that parents can teach to their children. I was recording an episode on my own for this podcast. I've decided to include conversations with people like yourself who just enrich our understanding of anxiety and the mind, and struggling well, especially at a time like this, and also thriving. I'm also chatting to people who have experience living with anxiety and what those challenges are like. And I'm also jumping on behind the microphone by myself. And the other day I recorded episode 2, which was about this idea of metacognition. And I shared a story about when I was a little girl and I had so many worries, because I'm not sure if you're aware that I've had anxiety since I was a child, which has sort of really brought me to the work that I'm doing today. And my gorgeous mum, trying so hard to support me and help me to stop worrying, asked me to conjure up the most beautiful picture I could in my mind. And as a little kid, I conjured up a vase of fresh flowers and tried so hard to concentrate on those flowers. And of course, my mind would drift, and then I'd think, well, what's wrong? Why can't I do this? And back and forth I'd go with frustration and angst about, well, I can't get this right. And, we know differently now, and that we can't control what we think, can we? Can you speak a bit more to that?
Sure. No, I think that's a very common frustration, and it discourages a lot of people, frustrates a lot of people. They believe that they can't do mindfulness because they're not attaining this serenity instantly. And but it's a mental habit, and I think it takes a lot of diligent practice to create those new ruts that you can get into. But yeah, the metacognition, to be able to step back and think about your thinking is really important, and that's hard for younger kids to do. It's sort of developmental achievement. But there's a technique out of Buddhism that's very old called cataloging, and it's the idea that we stop and we catalog, or we describe our thoughts in a sort of a broader context. So, for example, I tend to impatience. That's one of my things. And so, I'll wake up in the morning and go, oh, I overslept. I'm going to be late. Oh, why isn't the light turning green? Oh, the elevator is not coming. So all of these different things, it's like, But if I think, impatience, more impatience. Oh, yet another impatient thought. It's different. It's like, whoa, or if I'm thinking, wow, I've been having a lot of envy thoughts today. What's up with that? Now I'm more curious about it. And taking that more curious stance toward our thoughts and feelings is, gives us a little step back, and maybe we can start thinking about, what's up with all the envy today? And maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe there isn't a reason, but it's a different state to be thinking about this stuff than to be immersed in it. So just thinking, wow, I'm having a lot of anger today, or I'm having a lot of impatience, or I'm having a lot of, whatever it may be, can be a way of mentalizing or metacognition around, what's going on for us that day.
Cataloging. Thank you for sharing that. It's something that I've been reading a book recently, which is called Parenting Freedom, and this is one of the strategies not listed or not noted as being cataloging, but being that observer and saying ruminating or judging and so that's but it takes for us to, like you say, move out from sort of looking through the thoughts and being immersed in them to sort of being able to mindfully sort of notice. And we go between those states, don't we? And I used to think, and meditation was an enormously impactful exercise, that I used to meditate twice a day for 20 minutes when I was coming through depression and learning to manage my anxiety a long time ago. I did get out of that habit when I had children. I usually finish that sentence by saying, need I say more? But it is something I could definitely get back
You
into.
had 20 minutes twice a day to do something?
I don't feel like I've got that now at the moment, but man, I need it. Isn't it funny? Sometimes the things we need most are the things we find hardest to get back to. I practice more of an in the moment mindfulness in applying mindfulness skills to what I'm doing, not a seated meditation practice. But
Right.
I used to think when I started meditating, and it's probably a fairly common misconception, is that you are going to be able to sit down and keep your attention on what it is you're focusing on, whether or not it's the breath or whether or not it's what you can hear. But that's not the case, is it? We come and we go and we come and we go.
Oh, yeah, it's shocking how chaotic and weird, our thinking can be if we just pause and let it run rampant. But yeah, it's not peaceful. I mean, maybe after 20 years or something, but it's frustrating. But I think it's true that it's that sort of everyday mindfulness that John Kabat-Zinn and some of the other folks promote, where you're being mindful while you're washing the dishes, mindful while you're brushing your teeth, and just really being in the moment, and finding ways to remind yourself that you need to do that.
We there's the research that I think it came out of Harvard that really concluded that 47% of the time our minds wander. So what, essentially we could kind of round that off.
Only 47%?
It's shocking, isn't it, to think that, rounding it off to 50, and look, I guess that was on average, essentially in this research was, for the benefit of the listeners, is that thousands of people were connected up with an app, and they were at random times sent a message. They were asked 3 questions. What are you doing? What are you thinking about? And how happy are you? And yeah, they obviously pulled the data, and the ultimate conclusion was that on average, the people in the study, and extrapolating that to people in general, have their minds wandering 47% of the time. That means we're thinking about something other than what we're doing, and that we're the least happy when our minds are wandering. And
Mhm.
so, yes, you said, is that all? And it probably did vary quite a lot. But it's, it saddens me to think that, that's a challenge for parents in families whereby, we only present with our kids 50% of the time? Are we only present with our partners 50% of the time? And, there is something we can do about that. It's painful to sort of know that this is often our reality, but that's the first
Mhm.
step, isn't it, in being able to make change?
Well, we're all the descendants of the paranoid people. Um, that the happy, complacent people got eaten. And so, there's evolutionary advantage to being, kind of scanning the environment and thinking about what could go wrong. Um, and so we're fighting our biology, I think, in a lot of ways. And I think it's a matter of, again, sort of recognizing, oh yeah, I'm going down the wrong road here. I need to jump over to the next road. Um, but there's a book called The Mayo Clinic Guide to a Stress-Free Life, which I think is a very ambitious title, but good luck with that. But in it, the author talks about default mode and focus mode. And default mode, as he describes it, is you're up in your head and you're thinking about stuff, and you could be planning your trip or thinking about the vacation you just took, or it could be worrying. And then there's focus mode where you're like in the zone and you're focused on what you're doing. You found your hands and you're eating the cereal or your whatever. And the research shows that, as you were just mentioning, people are most happy when they're in focus mode. I mean, sitting around daydreaming about your vacation is nice, but people are really happiest when they're engaged in the world, when they're connected, they're leaning in. The word attention comes from the Latin attendere, which means to stretch forward, and that's kind of like leaning into life is, really useful, and we're engaged and we're not up in our heads going, oh, what about this and that? But again, there is that sort of natural human tendency to have that more vigilant kind of head swiveling attention. What was that noise? What about this? What about that? So it's part of our biology. It's the human condition to be anxious. We're the only animal that we know of that knows we're going to die. So the existential psychologists talk about this a lot. How do we bear that with dignity? And
Mm.
that's the eternal human struggle.
Mm. Tell us more about, define I can say it. Define existential for us. Please share
Uh,
with us a little bit more about, what that means, and how that, affects our thinking.
well, I can't speak with any authority about existential psychology. I know a thimbleful about it, but
Mm.
it's basically the idea, as I understand it, that here we are, we have this life. We know it's finite, and we know too much about all the bad things that can happen to us. Um, and we're burdened with that, and the anxiety, the despair, whatever it may be, that is part of coming into contact with that awareness. And so how do we carry that? How do we bear that with some dignity and perhaps humor, and have a life that's valuable, and treat other people well? That's my understanding of it.
Mm.
And so it requires holding things lightly, and it requires recognizing when we're getting stuck in an unhelpful state, and having strategies for, flipping over to, something a little more productive or pleasurable, or whatever it may be.
Mm. 'Cause we only have this moment. We have control of our attention. Once we realize it's drifted, we can bring it back, and we have this moment, and one of the this journey of podcasting, I've been sharing quite openly, and that it's been a challenge for me with my anxiety. I wanted to be able to give back. I wanted to be able to sort of, bring more wisdom to the world, and I'm
Mhm.
so
No,
thrilled to be.
I'm impressed with your courage for doing this. Uh,
Oh, thank you. It has taken courage, and
mhm,
it has, and I have a friend who has a daily podcast actually, and he's been a real supporter for me. He calls me. He says he'll be my unreasonable friend. The one that sort of really gets you out of your comfort zone, and it is hard, and that I'm not alone in. Of course I'm not alone in that when we want to do something, but that the anxiety gets in the way, and knowing that our days are numbered.
mhm.
We don't know when our number's up. We don't want to spend too much time thinking about that, but how do you work with people who have hopes and dreams and goals that they sorry, I was going to sort of add in, obviously we both are really passionate about moving people forward in the direction of their values, but for goals that people have along the way on that in that direction of their values, how do you help people to move forward when they do feel really stuck, because that courage is hard to find. Courage is hard to find sometimes, isn't it?
Well, it's courage, motivation, a lot of these words, they represent, the constructs, they stand in for really action. So, a lot of teenagers, have told me over the years, I have no motivation to do my homework. It's like, if you're sitting around waiting for the motivation fairy to like show up at night and tap you with her wand, for one thing, you would like avoid that because you don't want the motivation to do your homework, because then you'd have to do your homework. But courage, these things are manifested through action,
Mm.
and you can tell I love quotes, but a psychologist said I can act my way into feeling better sooner than I can feel my way into acting better.
Mm.
And if you think about behavioral activation for depression or exposure therapy for anxiety, it's like getting out there and taking your anxiety with you, and like, this wasn't so bad, and maybe your anxiety goes down through exposure, desensitization. Maybe it never goes down, but at least you're living a valued life. Um, so, okay, I lost my train of thought, but oh, I know what I was going to say. As you mentioned a moment ago, all we have is this moment, and one of my favorite quotes is from an existential author, Albert Camus, who said, "True generosity towards the future lies in giving all to the present."
Mm.
And I quote that to parents a lot, where I just say, as parents, we can't help but worry about, what's this going to be like when he's 15, or, but he's only 4, 15, 15 will get here pretty quick, sooner than you could
Yes.
imagine. But right now he's 4. So let's take care of today. Tomorrow we'll take care of tomorrow. The next day we'll take, so it's that tricky balance of having to think about the future, but also, all we've got is right now. All I have is my hands, and what can I do in this moment? And if I do that, and then I do that, and then I do that, then, that will move me toward those future goals. And then, stuff shows up along the way that we didn't anticipate. And, we have to make adjustments, but, to try to bring it back to, right here, right now. And, what do I need to do? What would be my next best response to this situation?
What's the next right step?
Mhm.
It's I love that you touched on the idea that we don't have to wait until we feel good. I'm doing air quotes.
Yeah.
We feel good or free of anxiety. I recall being in, oh, seeing a GP, a different GP than I normally see. I had terrible anxiety about the kids' health when they were little. So I was a real frequent flyer at the doctor's. That was just, I would obsess over there being something terribly, terribly wrong. Terminal usually was where my mind would take me. And then I would seek that reassurance, which is that classic cycle, isn't it? And I remember being with a different doctor, and he rightly said to me, "How are you? How's your anxiety going?" Not focus on this tiny little rash that I'm saying is, the end is nigh. And he was able to sort of see the picture for what it was. This was really not about my child. This was about me. And I said, "Yeah, not great." And at that stage, I had, up until that point, refused. I mean, it was very serious, debilitating anxiety that was getting in the way of every day, every moment in every day. And he said, "Have you thought about, getting some more help? And, have you thought about the fact that when we're anxious, what we're really waiting is for all of our ducks to be in a row, and then then we're ready to move forward." And he said, "That doesn't happen very much, does it?" And it was at one of those really pivotal moments when someone puts something to you in a way that you can really connect with and really relate to. And it was that moment that I went, I can't. And I had this vision of these ducks, and one was missing. It was this visual I had created in my mind. I'm like, I can't keep waiting for that. I can't. I will wait the rest of my life if I
Oh, yeah.
wait for those ducks. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I never knew anxiety until I became a parent. And my son's 27, and it's like hasn't diminished. I mean, he's doing great. He's a
Darn
wonderful young man.
it.
He's doing great, but yeah, it's like no, I'm sure that's never going to go away. So yeah, to be able to hold that lightly. And one of the metaphors that I use, I don't know if I have it in my desk here, but somewhere around here I have a piece of glass, broken glass. I have a morbid fear of broken glass. And but I've got a piece of glass from a wine glass that I broke in the sink a while back, and I had to take the pieces out of the sink. But I can take that piece of glass and I can hold it in my hand, and it's edgy and I don't like it, but as long as I don't grip it, it's not going to hurt me. So I can hold that. It's not comfortable, but it's doable. But if I really lean into that and grip it and make that the center of my attention, then yeah, it's going to be painful, and I might not make good decisions based on that. Yeah, these kids, boy, they really put us through the grinder.
Don't they just? It is. You learn so much about yourself as a parent, don't you? Our kids here are 11 and 13, and they're amazing young people and great company and great value, but the buttons get pressed. And yes, it's just a huge learning curve, and it's ongoing. And I'm really working to be really as present as I can be with each of the kids. And also, when things happen, I'm trying to be the teacher. The word discipline, stems from the word disciple, and that I had terrible frustration with one of our kids. People who know me could probably guess which one. And
we won't mention any names.
It won't mention any names. Shall remain nameless. And it's a little thing. And I realise, I can see that it speaks to my state, that if it's probably a fairly classic thing that we have a big island bench in the kitchen, and each day one of the kids is there doing their remote learning, the other's on a desk in the lounge room. And when that table's sort of relatively clear and clean, and there's a nice bunch of flowers in the middle, it's just like things just seem so much brighter. But that's rarely the case these days. And So I'm just trying to work with my own needs for a little bit of order in the house when you're constantly in company with little people who are meant to be at school, versus being trying to hold it more lightly and be more accepting of the circumstances that we're in, knowing that they are now temporary. We do have, light at the end of the tunnel. And yes, I'm trying to, rather than sort of, there are times when you can, that annoyance can bubble up, and it can, spill out in what I say. And I'm trying now to help also this particular child understand that this is just a little thing that makes a difference for me,
Mhm.
and helping them get a new perspective on it as well, so that it's not just I'm getting nagged again to put my stuff away.
Right.
I'm just trying to think about it, that particular, we've obviously been in lockdown a very, very long time, and things that would normally not be an issue, more of an issue now. That's just how I'm experiencing life at the moment.
Right. We have no cushion for a lot of these things. And it goes back to that, idea of resilience and what allows me to be resilient. And if having a clean, you know, kitchen island, it helps me kind of get through the day and not bark at, my family members. Maybe it's to their advantage to help me have a nice clean, island countertop.
Yes.
If you want mom to be like cranky, just keep doing that. But if you
Yeah.
want a more pleasant mother, maybe you could like do that little thing that would be helpful. And you just
Yes.
put it out there and it's articulated, and then, people are people and they're either going to like do it or not do it or do it inconsistently or whatever. But you're asking for what you need. And
Mm,
that's helping you be more resilient. It's helping you be, you know, a better mom and, all that.
mm,
But to be able to recognize that and to go, oh yeah, that's what's annoying me is this thing. And as opposed to going off into something, that's not solvable or temporary.
mm. It is. It's it takes me back to when, long before I had many, many years of therapy and help with my mental health, which has been an extraordinary journey. I used to clean to I wouldn't experience my feelings. I'd never learned how to really, express how I felt, or just experience how I was feeling. And I would clean. I would clean and clean and clean and clean. And I grew up in a home with a mum, and my gorgeous mum is happy for me to share that, she was anxious too. And that was how she managed. I have very strong recollections of mum wearing, rubber gloves and with a Wet-X in her hand. And once I learned to be able to sit more with how I felt, it was remarkable that I was just able to drop that behavior. And so, they're very lucky. These kids don't know how lucky they are, because it's not like it used to be.
Of course.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
So, look, Chris, it's been gosh, we could chat all day, and there is, is so much wisdom that you've already shared, and practical strategies that we can take away from our conversation today, and start to put into practice. And would you have one parting message for parents who, and people who are, can adopt a lot of these strategies today, whether they're parents or not, into where to start? Where would be a good place to start if you're looking to start to sort of put some of these changes into place?
Wow. Well, I think exploring one's values in terms of sitting down and maybe getting out a piece of paper and just writing out what's important to me. What do I value in life? And goals are not values. To lose 10 pounds or to go on that vacation, those are goals and those are nice. But values are more like things that you never quite attain. So it's like honesty or responsibility or love or friendship or whatever it may be, and just thinking what's important to me, and then what are a couple of things that I can do in the coming week to manifest that or live that value, and not beat yourself up if you don't get around to it or it doesn't work out quite the same way, but just sort of set the intention of, what are my actions going to be in the next, week or next few days, that sort of, support this life that I want to have. And to be able to think about, focusing on those things, and all the other stuff that we have to do day in, day out as well, the more mundane stuff perhaps. But just think in terms of, I can act my way into feeling better sooner than I can feel my way into acting better. So what are the actions that I can take that, right here, right now, that, live my values and express who I want to be. I have a coffee mug that says, "Be the person your dog thinks you are." Um, which, I don't have a dog, I have a cat who couldn't care less. But it's sort of the idea, like, yeah, I could be that person. I could, it's almost like fake it till you make it. You know,
Mm,
uh, Aristotle said we acquire virtues by putting them into action. We become
mm,
just by acting justly. We become generous by acting generously. And again, it's
mm.
creating that groove that my life is going to go down as sort of a habit, as opposed to this groove that hasn't been very helpful to me or the people around me.
Yes, yes. It brings that willingness, doesn't it, to bring those uncomfortable or painful or difficult thoughts and feelings along when
Hmm.
we're moving in a value direction. It's a really integral part to being able to build a rich life, isn't it? It's
Yeah,
it's
I think having those valued goals dignifies the stuff we're going to have to feel in order to get there.
mm,
And anxiety is directly related to what we care most about. If
mm,
we didn't care about our kids and their health or whatever, we wouldn't be anxious about it. And we wouldn't
yeah.
be the kind of people we want to be. So, my anxieties and other emotions, depression or anger, whatever it may be, they're directly tied to what I care about and what I value.
Mm,
And so recognizing that can sometimes be helpful to go, well, I'm anxious because I care, and I want to care, so that's part of the deal. And being
yeah.
courageous is, being scared and doing it anyway. It's not,
Mm.
not being scared. So it's the ability to hold that lightly, stay focused on the goal, and move toward that in an effective way.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh,
Yeah,
you've
it's been my pleasure.
brought
It's been a lot of fun.
oh, I've so loved chatting with you and catching up with you again. And thank you, really sincerely, thank you so much, because I know that people listening will learn so much, just insights, strategies, and really just a new perspective and a new way to move forward. So I'm super grateful. Thank you again. And
No,
how
it's
can
been my
people
pleasure.
Oh, thank you. Can you tell us before we part ways? I'd really love for you to share with our listeners more about where they can find your books, and a little bit more about, if they wanted to look for your books. I know you've got a number. I've got two of them, but you've got some picture books that you've co-written
Mhm.
since we last chatted.
Right. Well, Amazon, you can find them on Amazon. You just, type in my name. There's some other Chris McCurrys out there who've, written other books, but um, there's the one that came out many years ago, Parenting Your Anxious Child with Mindfulness and Acceptance. Um, there's a book called, there's a book for clinicians called Working with Parents of Anxious Children, which was a total disaster sales wise. I don't think Norton's ever going to speak to me again. But
Oh, I've got a copy. It's right behind me.
oh, you bought the other one.
It was me.
Yes, you bought the other one. And then there's the little books, which are really adorable. They were written by a colleague and friend of mine, Emma Waddington, and myself, and illustrated by this wonderful illustrator. And there are four books on four different topics. There's one on divorce, there's one on healthy habits, there's one on manners, and there's one on diversity. And it's 12 questions that kids might ask their parents about these different topics, and then how to answer those questions. And they're really cute, and they're a lot of fun. And then the most recent one from a couple of years ago is a workbook for anxious teens that I co-authored with a couple of Canadian psychologists, and it's through New Harbinger. But any of these would be available on Amazon or directly from the
Oh,
publishers.
absolutely fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm sure there are a lot of people who are going to want to, learn more from you through your writing. So thank you again, Chris, so much. It's just been a
Thank you.
joy, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you, Jody.
Thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave a review. To keep the conversation going, I'd love you to join me over on Instagram. You'll find me at Dr. Jody Richardson. Also, if you'd like a copy of my free 5-day mini email course, Calm Your Anxious Brain, then jump over to my website, drjodyricardson.com, and you can sign up down the bottom. I've really enjoyed having your company. Thanks so much. See you next time.